Okay. I'm sorry, Ellen, I had to get up. Okay. That's okay. Hello, Lynn. She's coming on. I see you. All right. And hello, Dorothy. Nice to see you too. It's great to see you. Okay, so this week's parsha is the parsha of Ekev. And I know I frequently say this is my favorite parsha, but this is really one of my favorite parshas because it's about food. So what could be bad about that? Jews and food go hand in hand or hand to mouth. And it talks about the blessing of food and the challenge of food. Interestingly, in the entire Torah, or really in all of Judaism, there is only one blessing that is obligatory based on the Torah. So it's called a halacha misinai. It is doraisa, which means it comes from the Torah, and that is the blessing that we say after we eat food. And after we eat food, we are obligated to say a blessing. And hold on one second, let me just give everyone a chance to be muted, and please unmute when you have a question or a comment. Okay. So what is it about food that is so challenging? And why would it merit special distinction? If we think about all the things that we consider that God does for us, why would there be specifically a blessing over food and not the blessing beforehand? So many people are more familiar with hamotzi, or you make a blessing before you eat, but that's derived from the fact that we make a blessing after we eat. It's after we eat that we are commanded to make the blessing. So what is it about food? And we're going to talk about this. The phrase is viachalta v'savata uverachta. Viachalta means and you shall eat, v'savata and you shall be satisfied, uverachta and you shall bless God. And that is the commandment, and it is, if you want to see in your Chumash, if you have the stone Chumash, it's on page 985. It's chapter 8, verse 10. You will eat, you will be satisfied, and bless Hashem your God for the good land that he gave you. So let's talk about why, of all things, considering we had the redemption from Egypt, we have the giving of the Torah, we have I don't know, splitting of the sea, we have all these things that we have blessings, or that we have blessings over, but why is it that food is the thing that we are commanded in the Torah to make a blessing for after we have eaten? Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas about why it would be food? What's maybe challenging about food, special about food? What would lead to that? Lynn.
Well, we can't live without food.
Exactly. We cannot live without food. So what does that mean? So what are the ramifications of that?
Well, so if there's anything in life that we need to be appreciative of, is that there is food. In the case of fruits and vegetables and all, it's from nature, it's from God. And so at least that's what comes to my mind, why we need to not just say the blessing before, but afterwards, thanking God that we are physically able to eat, and there is food for us to eat.
Great, wonderful. So let's explore that, and we'll explore other things as well. The fact that there is food for us to eat. So in what's called the Great Hallel, which are 26 lines where we thank God, and we say it on Shabbos, Kili Olam Hasto, that God's chesed, kindness, is everlasting. It goes through a number of points in history. And then the last line is, Noten lechem l'chol basar, and God gives bread to all flesh, Kili Olam Chasto. You would think that would be like the first thing, and then we would go on to like the major historical events. But that's the grand finale, is you provide food for every living thing. And that is the culmination of the 26th final statement about God is providing food, because we cannot live without food. So, and what about the frequency that I know I'm like, as Western Americans who are for the most part well-to-do, we probably eat more often than is necessary or than was even customary. It used to be customary to eat 2 meals a day, in the morning and in the evening. And that was it, which is why on Shabbos, there's a mitzvah to eat 3 meals. So Udash Lishit, the third meal, is to make it different than every other day. As opposed to me, I eat 3 meals a day every day. So it's not as special. So I have to be really careful to kind of think about the 3 meals of Shabbos, because it used to be morning and evening. So having something else, a third meal, 3 meals in one day, that was considered extra that we would do for Shabbos. So the frequency with which God has made us dependent on food, because he could have made us differently. He could have made us in the food category more like a camel, where we would kind of eat something, eat a lot, and then store it up, and then, eat every once in a while. But God made us hungry. As God made the Jewish people especially hungry. And I'm not sure if we have a lot of food connection. I'm especially thinking about this because we just came home from a Shabbos weekend celebrating a wedding, and the food did not, the people were so incredibly generous. We got there Thursday night. Friday, during the day, there was a light lunch, which consisted of salads and wraps and sushi and everything else. And everyone was sitting around, and then some desserts and ice cream and candy and blah, 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 blah. And then we went and had Shabbos dinner at the shul. And then there was an oneg. And then Shabbos morning, there was something to eat beforehand if you want to eat. And then Kiddush, and then Shabbos lunch, and Shalosh Shidduch, and then afterwards, and then a Sunday morning. And it was like nonstop food. And guess what? Everyone seemed to be pretty hungry for every single thing that was placed in front of us. I said, I felt kind of like a Passover. I've never been to one, but a Passover program that people say you just kind of eat your way through it. And on one hand, I could say it's like, okay, Diana, it's a little bit too much. But on the other hand, the simcha and the joy of eating is eating for most people, unless somebody has a difficulty, eating is also pleasurable. We enjoy eating. It's not just that we have to eat, and because we're hungry and our body needs nourishment. God has made it so that eating is pleasurable. I'm not sure animals get the same pleasure from eating that human beings do. And we're grateful for the whole experience. So when we are in this heightened experience of here's something, it's like God did this, I think, very smartly. Here's something like I'm going to connect my relationship with you is something that requires you to have a frequent relationship, like several times a day, where the eating is pleasurable, because specifically it doesn't say v'achalta uverachta. It doesn't say you shall eat and bless. It says you shall eat and be satisfied and bless. And that link in there of v'savata, and you shall be satisfied. What does that even mean, to be satisfied? That's almost like a spiritual, emotional component to the eating. That doesn't say like, I for one, do not stop after my body has received its requisite calories that I need. I kind of keep going until whatever, I feel full. So the savata, and to feel satisfied, is what triggers the blessing, because the halacha is if you eat and don't feel satisfied, you don't make the blessing afterwards. So it's interesting. So in things like, for example, let's say you have hot coffee, you say a blessing over the coffee to start it, but the question is, do you say a blessing after you've had your coffee? So, well, it depends how you drink it. If you kind of nurse it along throughout the morning at your desk, and you're kind of taking a sip here and a sip there, do you really have satisfaction from having had it, or have you schlepped it out over such a long period of time that yes, you've had it, but you don't really have a sense of satisfaction? That might be different than on a hot day when you have an iced coffee and you kind of gulp it and you have that feeling of like, refreshment. That is savata. That is a sense of satisfaction. So it's the satisfaction piece that God is tapping into, that has created us to be able to experience that of like, that was so good. I was so hungry. That is different even than the anticipation, because if you would ask me if I was writing the Torah, I would say you should make a blessing before you eat, because that's when you are aware of being hungry. So, but being hungry that's something that's across the board for all species. that is something like all animals get hungry. My grandkid's goldfish also goes to the top when he sees, you coming with the goldfish food, when you're plunking it into the bowl, and he's like going crazy. So that's something. But I'm not sure if after the goldfish eats, as he's swimming around, he's like, oh wow, that was like, those are the best flakes I've ever had. Like, that's not a goldfish thing. I don't know, maybe he does, I don't know. But human beings specifically are tied to the concept of a savata because it also gives us an opportunity to enhance our satisfaction. So if we don't necessarily respond to just our caloric requirements, what is it that is making us satisfied? So how would you think about that? Of what is it that makes us satisfied? That's a bigger component, which is why people have all sorts of eating issues, is around the savata part of it, of what does that mean to be satisfied? So what goes into that? What plays into that? Thoughts?
Well, like what she said, that there would be enough and as much as you want, or more than you want, more than you need. That's part of it.
Okay, part of it is that you can have your fill, like, that it's not, and okay,
That
so
God is
that's part.
providing. God is providing it for us. So
God is providing it, and it's available, and I feel an appreciation for that. So that's part of the satisfaction. What else leads to the satisfaction aspect of it?
it was good.
It was good. Okay. It tasted
Yeah.
good. It tasted
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
People, human beings are, we're watching the buffalo on our trip this summer, and they're just grazing on grass. I don't know if it was good grass or not. They didn't seem to really care. They were just kind of eating away. So it's just grass. They have the same thing every single day. People have a hard time with that. Human beings need variety, not only for nutrients' sake, but also just for the satisfaction. I learned, and I hadn't ever learned this before, that was part of the people's complaint about the manna, was even though it tasted like anything they wanted to taste like, it didn't look different. And there is something about looking at something that is just the same old thing every single day that made them, they were not satisfied because it looked the same, even though it tasted different. So you think about it. Again, going to my food experience, the food was so deliciously and beautifully presented. The fruit platters, the vegetables, the salads, it was colorful, all these things. It was a feast for the eyes, the smell of it, the look of it, the taste of it, the whole experience of it. It was just so multifaceted. And that this is an experience that for a human being, if God is trying to get a message like, I'm here to be experienced in an all-encompassing way, food is our quickest path to this spiritual connection. It feels good, it looks good, it tastes good, it makes me happy. Like, this is what we are supposed to be saying about our spiritual life as well, except sometimes we have difficulty connecting, and we use food as a pathway. I'm going to use my food as a pathway to connect to deeper sense of spirituality, where my life, my connection with God, my connection with myself, connection with other people, it makes me happy, it's satisfying. I like the variation, all of these same things that we can say about other aspects of our life that we maybe tend to not tune into as much. So we're using the food as a vehicle for connecting to everything else in our life. And that's the opportunity of the achalta v'savata, which is more powerful than the blessing we would say beforehand. So again, we only make the blessing beforehand as what's called the chomer. If you're going to make the blessing afterwards and thank God for what he gave you and how satisfying it was, how much more so before you even eat it, are you grateful because you're hungry that we should say a blessing. The main thing is over the being satisfied. And that when we are satisfied, we want to take that experience that we are feeling around food and expand it to other things. Which, if you happen to notice, is everyone pretty much familiar with the Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals that we say after eating bread? Okay, so we say a blessing after eating other foods. After a drink of water, there's a very short 2-line blessing. After a snack, there's a short blessing. But once we eat bread, it triggers a whole long song, a whole long thing. So we're using bread as our primary example, which is also interesting. Now, I know people who don't have gluten or you don't eat bread on your diet or whatever. For most of humanity, bread is considered a staple. It would not be a good idea for God to have, or for our sages to have made that the bread specifically, to have it only be something like when you have a prime rib, or when you have something that is very expensive, very unavailable, and very infrequently eaten, then you would say this long blessing. No, it's tied to a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's tied to a deli sandwich. It's tied to a piece of toast with butter. It's tied to a bagel and cream cheese. It's like, that's pretty mundane. So God is saying this mundane thing, which I'm pretty much guaranteed you're going to access multiple times a day, or at least once a day, to connect and to be able to use the quality of satisfaction to be able to think about other things that we are satisfied with, which is why the Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals, is so long, because it doesn't just stop at talking about the food. Does anybody remember what else we talk about in Birkat Hamazon? There are other topics that are also part of what we thank God for while we're at it. Etta. So your microphone is not working. Now I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, we're not in our own house. I remember, I should remember a lot more, but basically I remember we bless Hashem for the land of Israel. We bless Hashem for everything you can imagine, parnasa, safety, luck, helping us with our enemies, you name it, it's all in there.
You name it, exactly. We use it as a launching pad. Like, speaking of satisfaction, lest I become only focused on the culinary of how, how my palate was whatever, or how my, mouth feels, or how my tummy feels, or lest I get into it purely from a gastronomical place, I take this opportunity to have the satisfaction and I mention other things so that I connect it. So I connect it to the Exodus from Egypt. I connect it to giving the Torah. I connect it to Brit Milah. I connect it to the land of Israel. I connect it to gratitude. And I'm going to list a lot of things I'm grateful for that also give me satisfaction. My relationship with my family. I put in everything I can. It's like, as long as I am feeling this satisfaction, it says, when you're feeling happy, and this is a quote, I don't know where it's from, but I heard it from Rabbi Daniel Gladstein. When you're feeling happy or satisfied about anything, we are advised to use it as a launch pad for mentioning other things. That we should use it and not miss an opportunity to have an expansive approach to this gratitude and sense of satisfaction that we're feeling, which is perhaps another reason why we don't have this before we've eaten. Before we have eaten, we're cranky because we're hungry. It's a very hard time to start thinking about the things we're grateful for, because honestly, I just need something to eat. It's very hard for me to think about other things I'm grateful for. I need to be in a certain place. And that's a recognition of the human reality. I need to be in a certain place where I'm feeling satisfied. And when I'm feeling satisfied, then I can mention the other things that also make me happy. So it accomplishes many things at one time. The first is that it keeps me from focusing only on the food. Lest I forget that I am a soul housed in a body, and I'm not just like a walking body that is looking for the next great meal. Again, even that's kind of what I felt like, looking for the next great meal, the next great snack, the next, amazing dessert. That's not who we really are. And it's very easy to forget that when we're immersed in a physical world. So lest I do that, I mention these other things. And at the same time, I want to use this physical pleasure, because it's easier when I'm feeling something that makes me feel good. it's easier for me to think about other things that make me happy and that make me satisfied. So you notice that like at simchas, people make toasts and they do things to like enhance and make the celebration go up and up and up, and everything becomes more intensified. So again, going to the wedding was really nice. The mother of the bride's birthday was on the day of the wedding. So we had a happy birthday and everyone sang, and we had that whole thing. And then there were several families making aliyah, including our mechatanim, the parents of the groom, and the bride's family had made hats for like several families making aliyah. So we sang Israeli songs and did Israeli dancing around them, and everything just became, you could have just said Mazel Tov on your aliyah, that you could have just had that, but everything was like, take the opportunity of the joy of the wedding, and what else can we be happy about? And we just put it all in there. So it becomes a big, literally a big bucket to hold all the things that we sometimes don't pay attention to, that we should be paying attention to, that we have an opportunity to connect to because we have a physical experience that is helping us because we're already feeling something pleasurable. And so we can add to it. Okay. Any other thoughts about, excuse me, about that and about the eating? Any other challenges about eating? We mentioned already the idea that we might just kind of get into a complete, to be an Epicurean, or, like was it the Greeks who would have the vomitoriums, where they would get together and they would binge, and then food, and then they would vomit
Romans.
so that they could eat more. That was what they did because they were, I'm sorry?
The Romans.
So they were focusing on, it was the Romans. Okay, thank you. The Romans, one of those other peoples out there. Yes, the Romans. And, some of it is just like, and people, we even say this, not that we're doing that, but people say, I'm stuffed. I'm up to here. I'm stuffed to the gills. It's like, that's probably not such a great idea. We do have an idea. As much as it's always so fun to go like to a smorgasbord or to an all-you-can-eat kind of thing, all you can eat is really not a Jewish idea, that the goal is not to reach the, or food contests of like how much can you eat, or like this, even a focus on all you can eat. The idea is really to have a tempered, moderate approach, but also to enjoy it. So one of the challenges also, aside from just thinking about the food only, is to become obsessed with food, and to become focused on the next, I guess you would say, the novelty. And I mean, Jewish people do this all the time. There's a new kosher restaurant open someplace, and you would think, that, it was the invention to cure the common cold. It's like, really, there's a new restaurant, we have to try it. How is it? Was it expensive? What was the wait time? Can you get it? So we are like kind of a little crazy about that. And yet our approach to food is to enjoy it, to truly enjoy it, but to remember that it is still a vehicle. It's a vehicle for a broader relationship. And then there's another challenge with food, which is how you get your food and where it takes our minds. So in the Torah, we are told, we're kind of warned a little bit. Let's see, hold on one second. So that we can fulfill the mitzvah. Hold on one second.
Ellen, I have to apologize. I have to leave for a meeting that got moved.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thanks for joining us for what you could.
Okay,
Take care, Lynn. Hope to see you next week.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So in the Torah, right, verse 11 on page 985, it says, right after it says, you will eat and you will be satisfied and bless Hashem your God for the good land that he gave you. Then it says, take care lest you forget Hashem your God by not observing his commandments, his ordinances, and his decrees, which I command you today, lest you eat and be satisfied, and you build good houses and settle, and your cattle and sheep and goats increase, and you increase silver and gold for yourselves, and everything you will have will increase, and all that is good except for one thing. If your heart will become haughty, and you will forget Hashem your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. that this is what is like, lest you forget, and that you will say in your heart, and this goes down to verse 17, my strength and the might of my hand made me all this wealth. It says that is the challenge of the physical world, is how do we get this food? Unless somebody was feeding it to us, you went to a simcha, you got it because of the money you earned or the fields that you planted or however you did it. Whatever that mechanism was, we tend to credit ourselves. It's like, it was I have such a good job because I'm so smart, I invested so wisely, I did things so well. It says, and instead of using it to remember Hashem, we use it to pat ourselves on the back. It says, and that is the problem. It says that when we are impoverished, we don't tend to give ourselves credit for that. Then we're like complaining to God of like, why is this happening? Why me? But when we have wealth and when we have what we want, then we are more likely to kind of forget exactly how this came to us. So this is, that is the challenge of food and all physicality, and that God wants to give us the blessing. But it's just like a parent who does not want to give a child something that's going to end up being used to turn the child against the parent or to take the child off track. It's like, I don't want to give it to you if it's going to take you in the wrong direction. So that's our challenge, is being able to use it as a vehicle and instead of drink responsibly, it's like eat responsibly. Enjoy this physical wealth that I want to give you, but it only is good for you if it is good for you, and if it's good for our relationship, and it's good for your spiritual growth in this world. If it's not, it's actually, I'm not doing you any favor by giving you all this food. So that becomes another reason why we specifically mention all these other things for which we are grateful when we eat, is to remind ourselves, I want to use this food as a vehicle for thanking God for the land of Israel, for the ample land, for the food, for the Torah, for the mitzvot, for taking me out of Egypt. Lest you think that I think that it's all about me, I want to be sure to include you, God, in this whole thing in a very broad way, as a reminder and as well as a direction, so that I know what it is I'm supposed to be focusing on. There are many people, again, depends on what your dietary needs are, who make it their business to have bread once a day, specifically so they can say the Birkat Hamazon. It's their avoda. It's not like, oh, well, I guess since I had a peanut butter sandwich, I guess I have to say Birkat Hamazon. It's like, I really want to say Birkat Hamazon. I think I'll have a sandwich. I'll have, a piece of bread and butter or bread and whatever, something, so that I can say Birkat Hamazon. Because otherwise we get very pulled off track. Again, going to the idea that we tend to eat several times a day. I mean, I remember my grandfather. If you were still hungry, the answer was have a slice of bread and butter. That was like the answer. If you're still hungry, have bread and butter. There was always bread on the table, and there's always butter or margarine, depending on what kind of meal it was. But that was always on the table. That was a staple. But just to have an idea is that at least once a day or a couple times a day, I would have an opportunity to recalibrate my relationship with the physical world that I am in and the physical body that I inhabit, and to be able to use it as a vehicle, that I don't have to go find the Eye of a Newt. I don't have to go find Mount Sinai. I don't have to wait until I'm having something really incredibly unusual in order to have this connection. I can do it through a piece of bread. I can do it through pizza. I can do it through anything. It's brilliant. It is a brilliant construct for us to use. The next piece that is in here is the way the Birkat Hamazon is structured. Is at the end, and you might be familiar with this, there's a section that are all the harachamans. Now the word rachaman comes from the word rachamim or rechem, which is translated as compassion. But it's really, the root is rechem, which means womb. And it talks about God as being the womber. Harachaman, when you add a nun, a final nun, to any noun in Hebrew, it means that you are the master of that. So if you are lazy every once in a while, it's called, I'm sorry, if you're lazy all the time, you are an atzlan. If you are, if something that nun at the end means like you do this all the time. So when we say that God is harachaman, we say that God is the one who is compassionate all the time, but it has to do with wombing. And the idea of a womb is that it provides everything that the growing embryo, the growing fetus, the growing baby needs. That it provides the nourishment, the safety, the space, everything. It says, and that is Hashem is Harachaman, the one who wombs all of us. So lest we feel that we are, adrift and afloat, that we should always remember that Hashem is Harachaman. So at the end, they're always, depending on the bencher you have. Now, I'm just going to say this just because I always do, because when I first learned the word benching, I thought it was called benching because you sat on a bench, or that people used to sit on a bench to say it, that it was a blessing you sat on a bench. But it's related, benchen is related to the Latin benedict, which means to bless, okay? Bendicho is blessed. So it's, in Hebrew, it's called a birkon from the word bracha, but people say, let's bench. So the bencher, depending on the bencher you have, the actual book, this is the one, I have this one, I have all the different kinds. There are a lot of harachamans at the end of it. And the harachamans, the first question, we don't tend to ask the question, is like, first of all, what are they doing there? They don't seem to have anything to do with the rest of the blessings that we're saying. So we have a blessing, we have a harachaman, and we start out that may the merciful God always be our king, blessed on heaven and earth, always be proud of us, and forever be honored by the way we act. In other words, we should give God nachas. May God support us with honor. May God break the suffering that is on our neck by our enemies. Bring blessing to the house and on our table. Bring Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. Bless me, my family, the people who are at the table, and their children, and everybody with everything. And then there are other harachamans that people add. There's ones for the Sabbath, there's ones for Rosh Chodesh, for Yantif, for Rosh Hashanah, for Sukkot, for Hanukkah, for Purim, all these harachamans. And then you can also add other ones. Again, at our wedding, they did harachamans when they did the Birkat Hamazon out loud at the wedding meal. They added a harachaman for the soldiers of Israel, for the soldiers, the Army of the United States. They added harachaman for the people who are making aliyah. They added a harachaman for the bride and groom. They added a harachaman for like all these different people, for refuah. The question is, what is this? Why is this here? So this is a beautiful idea that we can really have an opportunity to connect to, which is that when we are doing a mitzvah, any mitzvah really, it is an auspicious time to ask for what we need. And it's not in the realm of, okay, God, I'm doing this mitzvah, so now answer all my prayers. It's like when we are at this point, because a mitzvah literally means to connect. A tzav is a connection. When we are connecting through doing a mitzvah, it is a time of connection. It's like we have this meeting is going on, and it's as if God is saying, is what else can I do for you? What else? And so we are supposed to ask for lots of things. That's considered a sign of honor to God, that we're not supposed to say, oh, you've already done so much for me, I don't want to ask for anything else. That's what you say to a person. Like, I don't want to bother you, you've already done so much for me. For God, it's you've done so much for me, and I know you're the source of everything. Harachaman hu yivarech. God, may you bless my family, my children, my relatives, the Jewish people. And we go on a long, long list of saying what it is we want. Now, this isn't just true. Another time that we're familiar with it is the same thing happens when we light candles on Friday night for Shabbat or for the holidays, is also an auspicious time because we're doing a mitzvah. We're doing a mitzvah of lighting candles. So when we're doing that mitzvah and the connection has been made, then we are supposed to ask for other things. This is also when we're making challah, when we're doing the mitzvah of taking challah, why we also pray for other things. when we're reading the Torah and we say a blessing of Mishaberach for people who are sick. Some people are like, why do you have to add so much to the service? It's because it's called an Eit Ratzon. It's called an auspicious time. This is the time. So the truth is, you can do it when you're doing any mitzvah, when you're doing the mitzvah of giving charity. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mitzvah that requires a blessing. It can be, for example, the mitzvah of tzedakah. You can do a mitzvah, give the mitzvah of tzedakah, and even though we say like the highest level of tzedakah is to give anonymous, not only to give anonymously, but to help somebody else so they don't need tzedakah, but we can give tzedakah in the merit of something that something should happen that we want. I'll give tzedakah in the merit that somebody should have a refuah shlema. I'll give tzedakah in the merit that somebody finds their beshert. All of these things are like, it's called an Eit Ratzon. Same thing is true by a wedding. I have to say, I was too focused on my cute little granddaughters being flower girls that I didn't take advantage of the opportunity. But at a wedding, it says, while the heavens are open, creating this new couple, this bride and groom are a new creation. It's like Bereshit. It is considered a new creation, and everybody who's there is a witness to it. It is a very auspicious time to pray. So we use all of these times of connection to pray, to ask for things. So Birkat Hamazon, again, if something is challenging in your life, make a sandwich, and say a blessing and ask for what it is that we need. And then to thank, it's both thanking God for what we have, as well as asking for more for what it is that we need. So here comes, we see it's like, why does the Torah devote all of this space to food? Is because of the power that food has to really make or break our connection to the creator of the universe. And it can be used at the most simple level. So I noticed our kids, when they were here, they would ask their children, instead of saying, did you bench, after they had literally their peanut butter or their chocolate sandwich, which is very popular in Israel. Kids eat bread spread with chocolate spread. So would have that. So after their sandwich or their tuna sandwich, they would say, achalta, did you eat? Visavata, are you satisfied? Then they would say, verachta, then you bless. And then it's a way to train ourselves to focus on eating also as a spiritual endeavor. Psychologists have already, and anybody who's in any kind of a food program for anything has already been told that one of the worst things to do is to eat while you're distracted. So when should you not eat? So it's like, when should you not eat? Really, even though I don't really follow this necessarily. When shouldn't you eat?
Well, don't eat while you're driving, for sure.
But yeah, don't eat while you're driving.
While you're
yes,
just preoccupied with something.
when you're preoccupied, because you're not paying attention to what you're doing. Never mind the driving. You're not paying attention to the eating, which is maybe worse. It's not as dangerous as like not focusing on the road.
Yeah,
but it says, when do we like to eat? We like to nosh when for me, a sports game, the only reason to go is to nosh. That is the reason to go to a baseball game, is to have popcorn and to eat stuff. So really, when you're doing something else, it says it's not really such a good idea to eat because you're not focusing on what it is you're doing. So there are people who have a custom that while they're eating, they actually don't schmooze. They eat and then they talk and then they sing or whatever. But if you're reading and you're eating, you're watching TV and you're eating and you're doing other things and you're eating, it's like, how aware of the eating are you? So that's what they always tell you in a dieting thing. Don't eat unless take food, sit down and eat it and pay attention and be mindful of what you're eating, because you will not feel satisfied. You won't feel the satisfaction because you don't notice that you're eating. So you see the people go into movies like with a bucket of popcorn that's like this big. How are they not full? It's like, because they're not really paying attention. It's just going in. They're not really even enjoying it. So it says, even there's halachas about how many sips of water you should swallow at one time, of what's considered appropriate. Like, if you're guzzling your food, you're not really enjoying it. And we're supposed to savor it. That we're supposed to be connoisseurs. And a connoisseur, they take their wine swished around their mouth, whatever. Now you're not supposed to spit it out like you do with a wine tasting, but you do something and it adds to the pleasure. We've had reason to talk about this again on other times, but they've done studies about people with wine. They gave the two groups the same wine, and or maybe I don't know, it was one group the same wine, whatever it was, tested them, and they had one group do the swish, the smell, the swirl, the whatever it is that they do, and all these things, and then rate what they thought the quality of the wine was of their experience. And other people, here's a glass of wine, drink, l'chaim, drink, of which one was better. And the people overwhelmingly rated the one they spent more time with as better. So that there is something about engaging with the food. We are supposed to engage with our food and get the spiritual benefit out of it. Now, this is where I think that the blessing before eating helps slow us down and focus our attention. Because we have to, first of all, say, I'm eating, so there's a blessing that I need to say. Then I need to say, what is it I'm eating? Where did it grow? Where did it come from? What am I doing? What form is it in? So that I can say, know what blessing. If I have slowed down even for those 2 milliseconds, I'm already more mindful than I probably would have been. I think that was like, I forget what it was it Nouveau Cuisine or something? There was a time, I don't know if that stage has passed, where fancy restaurants would serve food of like basically microscopic quantities, but very artfully presented. And it was like more a feast for the eyes than actually like a full meal. But you were supposed to enjoy it because of its, the taste, the textures, or whatever else it had. So this idea is like, we're supposed to do that even with a peanut butter jelly sandwich. It's like, oh, this is bread. What's in here? So even though there's one blessing, just hamotzi for the bread, we're supposed to pay attention. And we're told in the Torah also, why does God want us to do this? Is that God needs these blessings? It says, Latov lach, that it will be good for you. You will have a happier, more satisfying, more fulfilling life. Period. You're going to enjoy your life more. And that's what God ultimately wants for us, is to truly enjoy our life at a multi-tiered level, physically, emotionally, spiritually, everything. And the way we do that is by focusing on this construct of eating, being satisfied, and blessing God and thanking God and using it as an opportunity to connect to each of these different layers and levels of our life. It does make me hungry just to think about all this. So I feel like eating something, but I already had my lunch, so I'm probably not going to. But anything else about eating? And maybe some of you have been on eating programs, or whether it's Weight Watchers or I don't know, other things tips that struck you as being Jewish in nature, or things that were helpful that probably have a Jewish or a spiritual connection that would be helpful. Anybody have anything that you've related to at all? Okay. So that is the V'achalta v'savata uveirachta that Hashem spends so much time focusing on for us, that we can use our food as a very quick path to spiritual connection. As quickly as it can take us far away, it can also bring us very close. And what's beautiful is that young people can learn this. We know that the way the Birkat Hamazon was written, it says that Moshe compiled the first blessing, and that was over the manna. And that Joshua composed the second blessing, and that was after being in the land of Israel. And then the other blessing was about the land and the building of Jerusalem, and that was from King Shlomo, King Solomon, and King David. And that these blessings grew, and then it was codified. So we take this, which again gives us the Birkat Hamazon, which also gives us a mini history of the Jewish people, which means every time we're eating, we're going through a historical review of what it is that the Jewish people have been through and what our focus is on. So we focus on the Exodus from Egypt, receiving the Torah, the land of Israel, our ancestors, and how we fit into the whole program. We are taught that people who are very careful with reciting Birkat HaMazon, that they will be ensured good livelihood, that they will have that, and that part of reciting Birkat HaMazon, I learned this, says, even though it's available to have on your phone, that one should not say it from one's phone. One should say it from a little bencher, like keep a bencher in your purse. And even if it doesn't matter, you can say it in English, you can say it in Hebrew, you can say it however you're able to as you learn it, but to say it and to thank God. So the reason we don't do it from our phone, it says, even though it's on the phone, phones were created to distract us with other things. And that as soon as we're looking at our phone, there's something that goes into our head that we're already distracted by our phone, that we want to do it from something, and especially from something printed, preferably rather than by heart. Even if one knows it by heart, that one should say it based on something written. So sometimes people have said to me, well, I feel bad because I don't know it by heart, because I would have to read it. I'm like, that's better. That's actually better. It's better to read it and to really have time to think about it, because just like eating can be done by rote and not thinking about it, Birkat HaMazon can also be done by rote, where people are just kind of rattling it off and aren't focusing on that either. So it's like, so what good is that? It's like, so you ate and you were satisfied and you blessed God with the same attention that you gave to your food, which wasn't enough, and then bless God without having the attention. So one of the ways that it's supposed to help us focus is, it says, and our son learned this as he was with his hearing loss, he was focusing on the halachas, the Jewish laws that have to do with saying things out loud so you can hear them. And one of them is Birkat HaMazon. The grace after meals is supposed to be done in a voice that you can hear, because the person we are talking to is ourselves. Says God knows what God has done, but we're the ones who are supposed to be paying attention. So by having the kavana, by having the focus and the intentionality and having it with us, you can get a little, if you need a bencher, let me know, I can get you one. And I have some extra ones, is to have them with you when you go someplace, and so that you can say the blessing and to practice it, and to start off at least with the first paragraph that focuses just on God giving food. That is God's overall thing. Is just like it says, God is our mother, and the main thing is feed me, and that we are like the little baby birds getting fed in the nest, and God has provided all the food that we need. Any limitations in food are purely from political and economic shortcomings on behalf of human beings, and has nothing to do with how much food God has provided in the world. So when people say, well, God hasn't provided food for people, it's like God has provided the food. If people don't have food, that's a function of our shortcomings, not a function of God's shortcomings. So we thank God for the food that he provides for every living creature. When we were at the zoo with our grandchildren, we went into the zoo hospital, and they have 3,000 animals that are taken care of. And the zoo doctors have to know how to take care of all of them, from goldfish to the rhinoceros, and to provide all the different foods that every one of those creatures needs. That's considered a full-time job. So if that's just in a zoo, imagine how much it is for the entire world that there is food. It says God created every creature, and God created the food that every creature needs. It's an unbelievable system, and it also speaks to the interrelatedness of everything, because as we know, certain animals eat other animals, so that there is a food chain, and the human beings are at the top of it. So that we eat things that come from all levels, that we eat other animals, or we can, if you're a vegetarian, that's fine, that we eat other animals, we eat plants, and that we use that all in order to remind us that the food is ultimately to give us strength and energy to lead a spiritual life. Ultimately, that's why we're eating. Hard to remember. It's like, why did I eat that sandwich? Why did I have that coffee? Oh, it was to give me energy to grow and develop as a human being in this world. And the Birkat Hamazon reminds me of what I am doing here, how I'm supposed to function, where I'm going, and the context for my entire life. There couldn't be as far as I'm concerned, there couldn't be a better chapter. It's like everything we need to know about leading a Jewish life, we could say I learned in the Birkat Hamazon. That if we could master that, we would really have a handle on everything. So thankfully, we have this powerful tool that is at our fingertips. It's beautiful to see. Obviously, my little grandchildren are Hebrew speaking. Like Dorothy's grandchildren are Hebrew speaking by birth, and it's just beautiful to see, a 3-year-old recite Birkat Hamazon with no problem. And we're all tripping over the words, but they can say it, and and they know what to do. It's really is beautiful. But even if we're not 3 and we haven't mastered it yet, the benchers, the Birkonim come in English and in Hebrew. And it's, again, somebody should not feel obligated to memorize this. You're better off not memorizing it. It is higher service to look at the words, to say them, keep one in your kitchen or on your dining room. We are inspired by what is available. We'd like to say, someone said, can I just say what I want to say? I said, you could, but how much better to say the words that Moses composed. Moshe Rabbeinu composed words. Those are really good words to go with. Joshua composed words. Go with his words. They have depth and meaning to them that are beyond our comprehension. And it's not so easy to compose your own blessing. Honestly, it's like every time you want to say something, it's like, you know what? That's not so easy. It's like writing your own card. When I was making my photo cards, it was like a 5x7 card, and I took it to one of the gift shops, and they're blank on the inside. And the woman said, we won't be able to sell them. People don't want a blank card. It's too intimidating. They have to think of what they want to put in it. And they want something that already has a message in there or something smaller. So coming up with your own stuff, you're a creative person like Kathy and like do these things, you can do that, can come up with these creative things. But most people are like, that's a nice idea to be creative, but on a day in, day out basis, go with the flow with what our people have been saying. And, one of the things that was really beautiful over our wedding weekend is people coming together from all parts of the country and all parts of the world for this wedding. And when we sang the Birkat Hamazon out loud, everybody sang it. Everybody was on the same page, literally. And it is part of the key of fitting in. It's part of being part of our people, is to know, to have the keys to that language and to be able to know what's going on. There might have been people who didn't know Hebrew and who said it in English, but everybody knew what it was. And people weren't making up their own thing. And there's a power in doing what everybody else is doing. And that augments it and sends it to a much higher level. It's really quite beautiful to experience. So that's Birkat Hamazon. We have the understanding that we want to eat, be satisfied and blessed, that satisfaction, we want to be able to take satisfaction that we're feeling at a physical, emotional, and spiritual level and use it to connect to other things as well. We want to remind ourselves that we want to connect to other things and not just have it be a food experience. To remember that the purpose of eating ultimately is to be able to give us the energy, emotional as well as physical energy. Sometimes, when we got home off from our trip yesterday, it was like, okay, first I'm going to have a Frappuccino, and then I'll start unpacking and doing the laundry and doing everything. It's just like, first I just need to relax, and food is often a part of that. So it is an emotional thing, it's a spiritual thing, it's a physical thing, it's a very comprehensive, amazing force that we have, is the way God designed food for us. So remember to have that and to really understand that this is really for our benefit so that we can be happy people. And we want to trigger to remember all the other things that we are also grateful for. When it's hard sometimes to think about it, that when we can piggyback literally with something that we are a sense of enjoyment and pleasure, that we can do that. And that we also use the time of benching as an eit ratzon, an auspicious time to ask for other things and to invoke God's blessing on other aspects of our life. So it's literally a sandwich of expressing gratitude for what we do have and asking God for more of what we still lack and wanting and what we are still need to have God provide for us. And with this, the way food has been structured, where we need to eat on a pretty regular basis, that we use something that is very mundane like bread to help give us a framework and a structure and a context to launch each and every one of us to higher and higher spiritual levels, where we get to a place where we ask to eat, not just because we're physically hungry, but because we want to have an opportunity to thank God and to connect our physical world to its spiritual source, lest we forget who is providing all of this. So just as we teach children and ourselves, hopefully, to have good manners, and then when you go to someone's house, you go someplace and they serve you food, and you say thank you, it's like, thank you, yes, to the person who served it, but the ultimate provider is the creator of the universe. And we want to not stop short and make sure that we have a full, all-encompassing experience. That in and of itself unlocks and unleashes the spiritual nature of food to make it more beneficial to us, to create even more satisfaction, and to make us even happier, more joyful people. So all of us for V'achalta, V'savata, Uverachta, eat, be satisfied, and bless God for all of the good that God has done for us. Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions or
Thank
comments or
you.
anything about Birkat Hamazon, yes,
Yeah, I
Dorothy?
do. Yeah, so,
Yes.
did you say that we could find one in with Hebrew and English together, like transliterated? And where would you recommend I look?
Transliterated.
Well, I can work on the Hebrew too. It's okay.
Yes.
As long as the
I would
English
say,
words are-
Dorothy, since you've taken Hebrew, I would say to work on the Hebrew, even just, even the opening line and the concluding line of each one, and then to say it in English. I would really recommend that. You could probably find a transliterated one. I'm guessing Art Scroll has a transliterated Birkat Hamazon. I have not looked to see, but I'm sure. Oh, wait, I know they have one. It's either they or NCSY.
Ooh.
NCSY or Art Scroll has a transliterated Birkat Hamazon. I'm sure I even have one. I'll check it out and give you the information for it.
Okay, great. Just a small
Yeah.
booklet. Yes, we can.
Yeah,
take
just a
good-
small booklet. Restaurants in Israel have like little miniature ones that are like fold up, and for you can just take in your purse or whatever
Right.
and always have it. Some people just always make sure to have it with them, never knowing when you're going to eat something
That's
and
right.
want to be able to say the blessing. But it's again, it's a fast track to spiritual connection and spiritual growth using something ordinary. You don't have to wait for Hanukkah. You don't have to wait for Pesach. You don't have to wait for a big Shehachian who's like, if you're planning to eat anything, you have a great opportunity to connect.
Thanks.
Anybody else have a thought, a comment, a question at all? Yes, Etta.
It's funny. I used to read a lot of science fiction when I was young.
Me
And
too. I loved
they
it.
were always trying to get a pill that you would take once a day. Or in Willy Wonka, he's got a 3-course meal he's working on one pill. So it's so not Jewish, that you don't want to not connect. You want to connect even if you eat anything. And here you'd be taking a pill and never connecting. So
Exactly right. And we would have like the manna situation, which even had a step up in that it tasted like whatever you wanted, but it was so, and think about it, like all the colors that our eyes are able to see, all the smells. It's like, that's not just like, oh, we evolved, blah, blah, blah. It's like God gave us these abilities so that we could enjoy the world that he created for us. And, we even had that on our trip that we went on. Our kids made T-shirts that said, Ma Rabu Ma'asecha, how great, how grand, how expansive are your works, that we wore when we went to the Grand Canyon, all of us. And that was the whole point. It's like, don't waste a good experience by just having it at a superficial level of a physical level. It's like, God created this, however you want to say it happened. It's God's work. It's not on any other planet. It's like there are thousands and thousands of miles of beauty and like marabu masecha. So that was on our shirts. It's like connect it. And we were able to say the blessing over seeing lofty mountains. We were able to say the blessing over hearing thunder, over seeing lightning, all of that as part of the experience. There are other people who were tourists, and I'm sure they were enjoying it, but until it's connected up, the final connection to the creator of it all, you're missing something. You're missing something. So yeah, we don't want a pill. That's like not going to be that will not be an Israeli invention. I can tell you that. they may figure out how to make something that's all plants and tastes like meat or whatever, and like oozes, rare meat or whatever. They'll do that, but they're not coming up with a pill that takes the place of eating food. It's not going to be a thing.
Something that's a little sobering. Talking about food, it reminded me of some people, a person I know of, and with people with eating disorders. And our granddaughter, Sivan, who's 18 now, is about to enter the military. She's doing Sheirut Leumi, the community service, and she's going to be working with young people at a hospital near Tel Aviv in a special unit with eating disordered inpatients.
Wow, good for
That's
her.
her job for the next year. So
I really
she'll
admire her
become an
being able to
expert.
do
She'll
that.
know a lot more than I do about it. Right.
Amazing.
Right. So it's
I feel for
unfortunate that
people.
these people have this problem, enough that they have a whole unit for it.
Oh, there are a lot of units, and unfortunately a lot of Jewish, especially girls, some boys who are struggling with that. Though I have to say, some of it's a continuum. Like we may all have a little bit of some kind of eating disorder, because if we're eating,
well,
no, I'm serious. If we're eating in a way that is not healthy for our bodies,
right.
Too much or too little,
right.
because of misperceptions about ourselves or about food or any of those things, we're kind of all a little off. I mean, obviously it's a big continuum. People are very ill, and it's just, right. I was at the doctor's, this was already a while ago. It wasn't anything having to do with eating disorder. It was for a mammogram, but a woman in the waiting room, she was so skinny, such bones, just bones. I thought, I don't see how she's even able to walk.
Right.
It's very frightening.
It is.
And the thing that's good is that people are much more open about it now. And so some of the pain and shame of suffering from it has at least come out, right. And people are able to recognize it, and that they're dealing with it, because I can't imagine, like any challenge, it's worse when it has to be kept under wraps, and you feel like even more guilty for having the challenge, or the families feel guilty for having the challenge.
It's really a family problem, really.
It is so sad. Must be very, very hard. And I admire Sivan for having that be her work, for her Sheirut Leumi. She should have much hatzlacha.
Thank you. I'll tell her that. Hopefully we're going to see them in September. We have our tickets.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Now we just have to figure out how to get there, how to do it.
Yes.
I may be in touch with you about that.
Yes. Be happy to advise what I know.
Right.
It's a ever-changing scenario.
Right. Ever-changing.
All right, ladies, it's so good to see you again. I hope you are all well.
Your class will only be in person. Is that what you were saying?
No, I said we should start talking about whether we're going to do
okay.
in person, or what we're going to do, and what people are ready for. And I know we're kind of in this weird time now where some things are opening up, and now we've got the Delta variant, and people are feeling nervous about that. And who knows? It's hard to even know what to do. So give it some thought, and we'll talk about it next week. Okay. Great. All right. It's great to see all of you.
Great to see
and I'll
you.
look forward to see you next week.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks, Kathy. Take care.
Thanks, Ellen.
My pleasure. Take care, Trudy.